A week ago today, I flew to Dallas, Texas to take a look at the new 2025 Ford Expedition. Today, I flew to Dallas, Texas to take a look at the new 2025 Chevy Tahoe and Suburban. Both of these vehicles have had launch events centered around the Texas State Fair. Both of them feature extensively redesigned interiors, carryover powertrains, and new optional 24-inch rims. Today, we're going to take a look at this new Tahoe and its bigger brother, the Suburban, see how they compare against the new Expedition, and see how they fit into the full-size body-on-frame SUV segment. Now, if by chance you are in the process of buying or leasing a new car, but you're not quite sure which vehicle is right for you, I can help by curating a customized list of vehicle recommendations that fit your needs. Visit drakemoscow.com/buying a car to see how I can help you find a new car. The fact that both of these vehicles were launched at the same time and the same place, and the list of similar features and qualities about them is pretty laughable. Both Tahoe Suburban and Expedition now feature black accented tailgates, although the Expedition now has a split opening tailgate, which is pretty cool. Both Tahoe Suburban and Expedition now have mobile center consoles, although this has been a feature for General Motors for a few years and it's new for the Expedition. As I mentioned, both Tahoe Suburban and Expedition now feature optional 24-inch rims, which is the largest rim size I've ever seen from the factory. And both Tahoe Suburban and Expedition have all new screens. Ford went with a much more futuristic approach with a large upper screen and a lower control screen. I haven't driven that vehicle yet, so I have yet to know how it is like to use that system while driving. I'm a little skeptical of it. Chevy went with a much more conservative, albeit still modern approach with a 17.7-inch infotainment system that does feature wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Thank you, Chevy. This isn't an EV, so it does still have CarPlay and Android Auto, and a fully digital instrument cluster. Those features are standard across this Tahoe Suburban lineup, from the base LS all the way to this high country trim level. Higher trim levels also have things like a digital rear view mirror. Ford's Super Cruise, which is their hands-free driving technology that is excellent and is better than Ford's Blue Cruise, and now a column-mounted gear selector. This means you have a bit more space in this center console for, again, your mobile center console, but also things like a wireless charging pad, cup holders, and a bit more storage. There's not still all of that much space. I feel like Chevy maybe could have done a little bit more with this center console space, but this is a traditional body-on-frame SUV, so packaging in this vehicle isn't the most efficient in the industry. That's what unibody vehicles come in handy, and this obviously has things like a transmission and a four-wheel drive system also that they have to fit underneath this car. So overall, it's a very updated and still very modern interior, even if it is a little less modern than the Fords. I appreciate that there are things like physical climate controls and buttons on the steering wheel. I much prefer that to things controlled in the touchscreen, which you can do and you have to do for some things like your cooled and heated seats. But I do like that there are some shortcuts to adjust your temperature and turn up and down the fan. You also have a heads-up display and a lot more physical controls over on the left to change things like going from 2 high to 4 high to 4 low, and your headlight controls and shortcuts to access your cameras on the screen. So there is a pleasant mix of physical buttons, some of which are carryover and look a little old school, but honestly, that's okay because I really do like having these physical shortcut buttons. Makes operating the vehicle while driving very easy. Ford's system, again, I didn't get to drive it, but I was sitting in it and interacting with it, was pretty advanced stuff. It was a lot of it controlled by this upper screen through this lower screen, lots of screens. The steering wheel was rectangular shaped and much smaller. This is a pretty traditional steering wheel, although I will say Fords of old, like the last gen Expedition and the current F-150, I'm a big fan of those steering wheels. They're really big and make you feel like you're captaining a large vehicle. This, well, it is pretty girthy. It's still kind of small in radius. The whole kind of front of this car actually feels like, I don't feel like I have that much room side to side sitting up here, and also sitting in the passenger seat. I noticed you feel a little confined, which is interesting in this super large full-size SUV. This is as big as it gets. I do wish there was a bit more scale, and I always felt that Ford's full-size vehicles, the F-150 and the Expedition, felt a little grander. I don't necessarily remember how the new 2025 Expedition felt in that sense, because everything has been been changed in there, but it is still very nice in here, very familiar. If you've been in any of Chevy's newest products, you will recognize this interior. Very usable, and I think the new look is great. Another notable attribute about this new Tahoe and Suburban is that the powertrains have remained the same. There are two old school naturally aspirated V8s, a 5.3 making 355 horsepower and 380 pound-feet of torque, and a 6.2 liter like you see here making 420 horsepower and 460 pound-feet of torque. There is also still a 3-liter turbo diesel on offer that now makes more power, 305 horsepower and 495 pound-feet of torque, and is available on the off-road oriented Z71 trim level. It didn't used to be. Chevy says that availability of the diesel powertrains is going to be delayed a little bit from the availability of these V8s. They're estimating Q1 of 2025 for the diesel. All right, now we are behind the wheel of the 2025 Chevy Suburban. This is the base trim, the LS, and I wanted to drive this vehicle because it has the smaller of the two V8s, the 5.3 liter NA V8, 355 horsepower, and I had never driven this engine before, so I wanted to spend some time with it. And I really can't tell that big of a difference between this engine and the 6.2. They are both old school in the way that they deliver power. They take a while to build up power when you put your foot down, and they both sound really good too. They're very throaty, very brawny, and I like both of them. So I don't think it's that big of a downgrade if you step down from the 6.2 to the 5.3. It's a little slower, but you don't really notice it. These are big, heavy vehicles. They don't accelerate that fast, no matter which powertrain you get. So I like both of these engines. In terms of this LS trim level, which is, again, the base trim level for the new Tahoe and Suburban, starts at just $61,000 if you go for the Tahoe version, a little more if you get the Suburban. You still get all of the niceties and technology that you would get in that high country. You still have this 17.7-inch infotainment system, 11-inch virtual instrument cluster. There are obviously all of the appointments on the interior of this car are not quite as nice. We have cloth seats, don't have Super Cruise on the LS, although on the LT and above it is available, except not on the Z71. You can't get Super Cruise on the Z71. No virtual rearview mirror or sunroof to speak of, but it still feels pretty similar up here. The driving dynamics are pretty similar. We're on smaller rims, but it's still very comfortable. This is still feeling like a Suburban up here, even though this is $30,000 cheaper than the high country version, which is pretty impressive. The other thing to note for the LS is that it is available with a bench seat in the front row, which is pretty impressive. So you can get the Tahoe and Suburban as a 7-seater, an 8-seater, or a 9-seater in this LS trim level. That's pretty cool. All right, I am now in a 25 Suburban RST. So this has the 6.2 liter V8 and the 24-inch rims. So RST and High Country both have the optional 24-inch rims and the same suspension setup as a result. So what I really want to see with this vehicle is how these 24-inch rims ride, because obviously a bigger wheel size is going to make the ride, it's going to impact the ride. It's going to, in theory, make the car a bit stiffer because you're going to have less sidewall and less suspension travel. In terms of other driving dynamics, this drives exactly like the last generation. This 6.2 liter V8 has the same amount of power as before, as does the 5.3, and when I put my foot down, I don't notice that much of a difference in the pickup between the two engines. This one, I would say, is probably a little torquier. It is a little torquier, and you do feel that a bit, but it's not that big of a difference. Putting my foot down here from a stop, oh, a little bit of wheel spin in rear wheel drive. Which is fun, or two-wheel drive, I should say. Didn't expect that, but so it is pretty torquey, and it's plenty of power, more power than you need, which is why the 5.3 is more than adequate. But I do want to talk about these 24-inch rims. I am really impressed by how Chevy managed the suspension, and they said they put a lot of effort into the suspension improvements on these 24-inch rims. So this has MagneRide and air suspension. Standard if you get the 24-inch rims on RST and High Country, and you notice the work that they put into this vehicle. It does have a really good ride. I would say it's no worse than the ride on the 22s that you used to get on High Country, and that you can still get on High Country on that's the standard wheel size on that trim level, and on RST. you feel bumps, they come into the cabin, you notice them, but they are not offensive. They do not punish you. You don't have to worry going up to the 24s, which look really good. I am a huge fan of how these wheels look. You don't have to worry about getting too harsh of a ride. That was something I was concerned about when I heard that they were gonna offer 24-inch rims, that the ride was really gonna be stiff. It is a little stiffer, but not too bad. Very happy about that. These are the wheels that I would go for because I think they just look so cool. The car, it really fits the proportions of the vehicle, this rim size. I think they really fill out the wheel wells and really help make this car look like the size it is. It's interesting to note also that the Expedition has optional 24-inch rims, so I'll be interested to drive that vehicle and see how Ford has managed its suspension on the 24-inch rims, see if they've done a better job than Chevy, or if they haven't done quite as good of a job as Chevy, because I think this rides pretty well. Happy to report. All right, I am now driving the Suburban Z71, which is the off-road oriented Suburban trim level, and Tahoe as well. And this one has the 3-liter turbo diesel. So I'm rounding out all of the engine options for Tahoe and Suburban. And this is the only engine that has changed for 2025. It has 10% more horsepower, up to 305 horsepower, and about 7% more pound-feet of torque, up to 495. So that is the highest torque figure. So towing with this vehicle should be the most impressive. Let me switch to 4 high so that when I floor it off of this light, I don't get wheel spin like I did in the Suburban RST with the 6.2 V8. So what I am really impressed about this engine is how smooth it is. You know, diesels kind of have are known for being a bit rough, and they're a rough idle, but this has a very smooth ignition, very smooth idle, and when I put my foot down, it really connects, and it does feel a bit more like you get a bit more thrust out of this than you did in the 6.2 V8, and definitely a little more than in the 5.3 V8. But the delta between how they feel in terms of acceleration off the line between 5.3, 6.2, and 3-liter turbo diesel, it's not that big. You're not really gonna notice it in day-to-day driving. What you are gonna notice is the sound. So the 5.3 and the 6.2, they both sound like pretty throaty V8s. This actually, like I was saying, it's really smooth. I'm not upset by how this sounds. It doesn't really sound like a big diesel engine with its loud idle. I think Chevy did a really good job tuning this engine. It feels very premium. When you put your foot down, it doesn't sound quite as good as the V8s, but it also doesn't sound bad. I am not bothered at all by the sounds that this 3-liter turbo diesel makes. And it is very torquey. I'm very impressed by the torque of this engine. Another benefit of the turbo diesel is its fuel economy. EPA estimates aren't out yet for this updated version, but this vehicle that I'm driving has 780 miles on the odometer, and it has averaged 20 mpg flat in those 780 miles. So that's just one vehicle. I don't know the split in terms of city and highway driving that those 780 miles have been. I'm guessing more city driving, but that's still pretty impressive. That is one of the benefits of the turbo diesel, is it gets better fuel economy. It goes farther on a single tank of diesel or gas. This one is showing over 410 miles of range. I think it's almost full, but I'm guessing that would go up in highway driving. This the best trip that this car has had in its 780 miles, it was 26.6 mpg, which is very impressive. So the former 3-liter turbo diesel was really efficient. That was its benefit. Also very torquey. This one is even more torquey, even more horsepower, but it seems like it is still very efficient, which I am very happy with. And yeah, I am very surprised and impressed by how refined this engine is. There goes the water bottles. Putting my foot down, you just get a lot of pull from this engine. It feels really good. It doesn't feel strained at all. 305 horsepower might not sound like a lot for this big of a vehicle, but this engine doesn't seem like it has to work too hard to pull you forward. In terms of this Z71 trim level, this is the off-road oriented trim level. So this has the really thick sidewall tires and has been tuned more for off-road. So you get a new increased approach angle and departure, a reworked front fascia and a skid plate underneath, all in the name of making this more off-road capable. In terms of on-road driving, I unfortunately don't have the opportunity to take this vehicle off-road. In terms of on-road driving, what you're going to notice is a really plush ride. Those thick sidewalls, there's another Z71 right next to me that I can see the sidewalls. They're really thick. They really help give this car a good ride. I mentioned how the RST on the 24s, the ride was pretty good, and it is, but this definitely handles bumps a bit better than that vehicle. Another thing you're going to notice is that you can't get Super Cruise on the Z71 trim level. I asked Chevy why not, and they said it had to do with the front fascia. They were more focused on making this vehicle off-road oriented, giving buyers what they wanted in terms of features, in terms of the front fascia, the looks, and the approach angle, than making sure it had the Super Cruise feature. So you can't get it in Z71. On all other trim levels except LS, it is available. So that's a bit of a bummer. I wish it did have that feature, but I'm not too peeved about it, because this is still just a really good vehicle that I think is going to appeal to a lot of buyers. Chevy said that RST and Z71 are their biggest two trims, the most volume. About 40% of all Chevy Tahoe and Suburbans are either RST or Z71. These are the personality trims, as they call them. They have a lot of character. RST sporty, Z71 off-road, and they're younger buyers typically that go for these offerings. Now, with all of the lineup, we have LS, LT, RST, Z71 Premier, and High Country. I'm bougie. My favorite is the High Country. I love the 24-inch rim design on the High Country a bit more than on the RST. They have unique wheel designs, although they are both 24s. And I love all the features that you get on that. I think it looks really good. Big fan of that. But I don't think you can go wrong on any single new Tahoe and Suburban. Honestly, the LS that I spent an hour driving in this morning, very comfortable, awesome tech, and it even had things like powered seats, a leather wrapped steering wheel, adjustable lumbar support. So you're not getting, there's no bare bones Chevy Tahoe or Suburban for 2025, and there shouldn't be, as they start at $60,000. So that base model, you're probably not going to find one for well under 65. 65 is probably the cheapest one you're going to find on dealer lots, and that still is a nice vehicle. You're getting cloth seats, yes, but you still have all this tech. You still have all the comfort, and that 5.3 V8 is a great engine. There's nothing wrong with it. So all around, very impressed by these new Tahoes and Suburbans. All the engines are good. I honestly don't think you need the 6.2. It's optional on a few trim levels, and I would recommend just going for the 5.3 if that's on offer, because it's a little cheaper and you're not really gonna miss the added horsepower. If you want the diesel, know that it is a great option. In terms of engine availability, the diesel's available on all trim levels, and the 6.2 is available on Z71/RST and up. So RST, Z71 Premier, and High Country all have the 6.2 on offer. LS and LT only have the 5.3 and the diesel. So you get your pick for gas and diesel either way. It's just which gas engine are you going for on some of those trim levels. And honestly, the 5.3 is still a great engine. So that's the 2025 Chevrolet Tahoe and Suburban. In terms of driving dynamics, it's very similar to the old one. It's big, it's boaty, and it's very comfortable. I am a big fan of the new looks and the new interior. All of it is very modern and very stylish. In terms of comparing it to the new Ford Expedition, it's definitely the more traditional of the two, but I think for full-size SUV buyers, that is going to be more appealing. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.